Maybe I'll just go to Arby's. Oh, never mind. Spaghetti it is. Let's see if they got a recipe.
You try to cheat death, but death won't be cheated. The only way to get off death's list is to watch and explain all the Final Destination movies.
Yeah, all right. Do you know how to make spaghetti good?
I do not.
Oh, shit. Volume's too loud. Dude's quiet. All right, so the first Final Destination begins with an opening credits sequence that drags on for what feels like hours. I mean, who does it think it is? It's a Wonderful Life? Even worse, the whole thing is mostly just a close-up of a fan that randomly makes blade unsheathing sounds, and also a couple of images of a history book that screams. Eventually, we see passports, airplane tickets, and books about France, so looks like this movie is showing, not telling, baby. We are in the hands of a capable director, if one a bit too obsessed with this goddamn fan. How long is this intro? 3 minutes? I could have had sex with that weird hanging doll like 1.5 times by now. Anyway, eventually we get to our main character, Alex, and he's packing a suitcase for his impending France flight. His dad asks Alex how his suitcase is working out for him because not every parent knows how to connect with their children. Then Alex's mom removes the flight tag from the father's last trip with the suitcase, but Alex asks her not to because, hey, the plane didn't go down and kill Dad, which the father confirms.
I'm still here.
But Alex's mom's plans of getting rid of her wiener kid are not to be derailed, so she is like, all right, you little friggin' weirdo, I'm taking the tag off anyway, shut the hell up, go to bed. While Alex sleeps, the wind literally whispers his name like a creepy stalker, and his clock changes from 1 to 180, which is apparently the number of his flight, which is how fate works.
I guess.
The next day, Alex and a bunch of other classmates are headed to France, and this dad hands his son some clearly fake money to try and trick French prostitutes or something, maybe. The airport warns everybody in French to not solicit, and then this random religious guy totally solicits young Alex with a pamphlet about fate and death like 2 seconds later, openly defying the French announcement woman and not getting tackled by the TSA because this is all pre-9/11. It's like, learn some manners and some French, you friggin' asshole. These kids all did. As Alex checks his bag, he notices some weird stuff like departure times changing, and then the woman points out that his birthday kind of matches their departure time, so
More fate.
Alex is feeling really nervous now, and his friend suggests
Let's go take a
in the airport because it sucks on airplanes, and it would especially suck to shit real bad, and then a girl walks in later and smells your shit.
Listen, okay? Listen, take some knowledge.
I'm pretty sure my dad gave me this exact talk once. Whilst shitting, Alex hears a song on the loudspeakers about dying on an airplane because this airport has the most fucked up Spotify playlist ever. The next song is probably 70 times 7 by Brand New. So Alex wipes his shitty ass and boards Volet Air, which is a fictional French airline that's so fictional, Alex notices that basically everything on the plane is broken and shitty, like how the door's a little scraped and the wings are a little messed up and the table tray is a little broken, and the only thing missing is a pilot nicknamed Pepe Le Crash, but no need to fear, because one of Alex's equally superstitious classmates mentions that he likes young babies on airplanes.
Younger the better.
Because God would have to be a real butthead to kill a young baby, right? Also, if he killed this disabled guy, that'd be mean, God. Anyway, so the plane explodes, and bags are flying everywhere, and a dude's body is just crashing around because I guess he didn't respect the fasten seatbelt light, when whammy! Alex wakes up. It was all a dream. He's still on the plane, but he hasn't exploded yet. Alex understandably flips out, and in his attempt to get off the plane, he inadvertently initiates a fight, which results in several other students and one teacher getting thrown off also. One goth girl just leaves because flights are way too corporate anyway, and her parents can apparently write off the cost of a trip to France, no problem. This is the moment when the movie really tips its hand at being made pre-9/11, because even though this kid is yelling about blowing up the plane,
Your plane's gonna explode! Shut up, Brownie.
the airport cops just ask him to wait for another flight instead of immediately shipping him to Guantanamo to be waterboarded with Capri Sun or, whatever they used in the late 90s. So this select group is safely in the airport when boom! The plane actually does explode, but for real. His dream came true. Alex and the others are taken to a back room somewhere, and then the FBI is brought in.
I'm Agent Ween. This is Agent Shrek.
And in case anybody is worried, the goth girl clarifies that Alex is not, in fact, a witch.
Not a witch.
I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch.
The FBI interrogates them all, and particularly Alex, but then lets them all go home because there's not really any evidence they did anything wrong, and also because they're all very white. The goth girl, who is named Clear River because neither her parents nor the screenwriter had time to think of anything better, says she got off because she believed Alex. Good call on her part. The other survivors are Carter, the asshole jock, his girlfriend Terry, Alex's best friend Todd, their hot teacher Valerie, and also Sean William Scott because it's not a late 90s, early 2000s teen movie without him. Oh, but he is wearing a hockey jersey, which reminds me, we should do the Goon series next. Ah! God damn it. Now we're at the huge mass funeral, which is a real bummer because I guess that means they didn't get to go to France. They do listen to this acoustic guitar party guide, clearly hoping Incubus is in attendance. And they watch the unveiling of a huge-ass eagle memorial for all the dead children, which is probably better than sticking Stonewall Jackson up there, but still maybe less tasteful than just no statue. Carter tells Alex he's never gonna die, which seems unlikely, and SWS tells Alex his driver's ed teacher told him that he's gonna die young, which kind of does seem likely. And then Alex tells Todd, no homo, but he misses him. See, they haven't been hanging out because Todd's brother stayed on the plane and exploded, and Todd's dad is kind of pissed at Alex for that for some reason. Even worse, Todd's brother was the one with the money in his pocket, so now the family's out $100 as well as a kid.
Wrong kid died, god damn it.
Alex heads home to investigate plane crashes and explosions in the hopes of learning something, but he's distracted by an extremely small, blurry, black and white newspaper clipping photograph of Clear attending the funeral, and he immediately decides to open his weird dresser drawers with hands for knobs and put a hand to his knob, if you know what I mean.
I do.
Alex eventually decides against going all Green Knight on himself, but at that exact moment, an owl who was watching and clearly wanted Alex to keep going smacks against the window, causing Alex to freak out and throw his Penthouse magazine into the fan, which instantly shreds it, causing a single scrap of paper with the word Todd on it to land on his lap, leaving Alex with questions to go along with his blue balls. And I hope Todd wasn't modeling in that magazine.
He's underage!
Speaking of old Todd, he's at home taking a shit just in case he needs to fly somewhere later. And then he shaves, and then he picks his nose hairs, and all the while, unaware that the toilet water is leaking and chasing after him. Eventually, it causes Todd to slip into the bathtub and somehow wrap a clothesline around his neck and also knock over shampoo so he can't get his footing. And eventually he dies, and the water shamefully retreats back into the toilet and returns to the Mountain Dew factory where it belongs. Alex runs over to Todd's house to tell him all about his masturbatory mishap, but stumbles upon the aftermath of Todd's death, which investigators believe is a suicide. Alex realizes his porn magazine was trying to tell him that Todd was gonna die next. The next day, a leaf falls from a tree. Is that a sign? I don't know, but Alex walks up to Clear, who mentions that it's almost fall, and Alex is like,
It's only the end of June.
and she's like, yeah, but it feels like it'll be fall soon. And I think Clear might be an idiot. But then she shows Alex this art installation she made that she says is a representation of Alex.
It's how you make me feel.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah, she's definitely an idiot. And because she's an idiot, Clear suggests that she and Alex break into the funeral home where Todd's body is being kept. And they find the dead, bloated body of his friend, but they also find the friggin' Candyman. He never says who he is or why he's there, but it's Tony Todd in a horror movie, so you just accept it. And it's implied that he's the mortician or something. And he knows a lot about death because Alex says he thinks Todd's death is an accident, but the Candyman says,
In death, there are no accidents.
which I don't think is true. But then he also says that the Grim Reaper is a Mac Daddy, which I'm pretty sure is true, so it's hard to say how reliable this guy is.
And you don't even want to with that Mac Daddy.
After their corpse viewing, Alex and Clear go on a little coffee date to discuss whether death is trying to kill them to make up for them having escaped the airplane fiasco when every other survivor character randomly shows up. They fight, and Terry reminds them that people died, so
Get over it.
then she gets hit by a bus.
Get over it.
Fortunately, Alex takes Terry's advice to heart because we smash cut to him chilling on the couch watching TV, clearly giving zero thought to the high schooler he just watched detonate into a fountain of blood and viscera. His dad says he's worried about Alex because, his best friend died, 39 of his classmates died, he just watched a high schooler detonate into a fountain of blood and viscera like an hour ago, and I get that his dad is trying to be attentive, but again, not the best at connecting. Alex says, "Shut up, Dad," and sees a graphic on the news explaining that the plane's electrical system exploded, or a gas line or something, but the point is that it exploded in such a way that technically they would have died in a specific sequence, even though I'm pretty sure that the first explosion would have caused them all to die equally. But whatever. Alex realizes that the hot teacher is next. Unfortunately, she's planning to pack up her freaky ass dolls and move out of town. Alex shows up in her front yard looking sketchy as hell, so she calls the cops on him. The FBI pick up Alex, and then the teacher experiments with 10 different ways to accidentally kill herself. Apparently, Death is like really big on fake outs. Like, we know she's gonna die, and we know it's gonna be some surprising mishap, but which mishap might it be? Might it? Will it involve the record player? Maybe it's the knife she has. Ooh, she's a tea kettle. Is that it? The pilot light went out. Will she blow herself up? Okay, no. But the water is hot, and ooh, she threw the hot water, but it's just because she was scared of the cup? Anyway, what ultimately gets her is that she cracks the cup, fills it with vodka, spills some of it on her computer, which explodes and then shoots glass into her throat, and then full on explodes and sets on fire, and then she accidentally knocks a bunch of knives into her chest, and then a chair falls over to knock the knives in further, and then the entire house explodes. Holy shit! Fate's boss must be breathing down its neck because it is leaving nothing to chance this time. Alex goes to the police station, gets interrogated, leaves, heads straight back to the teacher's house, breaks in, tries to save the teacher, watches her die, and then flees the scene right before the house explodes. And that last part is noticed by Sean William Scott, who thinks it's a little sketchy that Alex was able to run from a house that literally detonated. The cops are now officially looking for Alex as he left some evidence at the scene that he'd been there, and the other surviving teens are told they can call the cops anytime, and don't worry, the number's toll-free.
Here's my card. Toll-free number.
But instead, the remaining horned-up teens go find Alex together and somehow know exactly where he is and arrive at the accident site where Alex is hiding while some very porny music plays.
Going down.
Which might be another pornographic warning sign? Maybe Alex was finally jacking it at the accident site? That doesn't seem safe. Clear goes to get him and says, "Come on, man."
Death.
So Alex gets in the car and now he's accused of being a warlock.
All right, Browning, warlock.
And Carter decides, never mind about the whole "I'm never gonna die" thing. I think I'd rather just die. So he drives really fast like he wants to crash, which is really shitty because I assume other people in the town don't want to be killed in a car crash. But then Carter just parks on some train tracks to await his demise. The others get out of the car and then Carter decides, okay, maybe I don't want to die, but oh no! His car won't start and the door is locked and his seatbelt won't come off, so Alex has to run over and save him from the train, which he does. And then Sean William Scott freaks out. Is like, wow, that was nuts. And then the train, which never stops, despite hitting a full-on car, kicks up a random piece of metal that flies out and literally decapitates him, which, wow, is nuts. So, okay, now for some reason, Alex decides because Carter was saved, Death gave up and skipped him and moved on to Sean William Scott, who is next on the list. Does that make Carter invincible now? Will he never die ever? Does Death really decide to give up if you thwart it twice? No time to think about that because Alex is next on the list, so he runs away to death-proof a cabin somewhere, and Clear, for her part, decides to go home because she's not next, so why worry? Except, like, if Alex dies, he'll have no way to tell her that she's up, and also, even if he doesn't die, doesn't that mean he thwarts Death and Death will move on to whoever's next on the list, which is Clear? Either way, they need to be together for communication purposes. And what do you know? While wandering the cabin, eating from cans, and surviving deadly Rube Goldberg traps, DRGTs, Alex realizes, oh, actually Clear is technically next on the list because Alex switched seats before the accident. So he leaves the cabin and runs to her house, but not before escaping the cops in a canoe and getting pinned down by a fallen tree in a puddle like he was Bruce Willis or something. Death has now completely given up on making it look like people were killed by fate. I mean, Death pummels Clear's house with lightning, blows up every electrical thing in the building, shoots weather vanes at her, drops power lines on her, pops her above ground pool, stops her car from working, spills turpentine everywhere, and basically does everything short of redirecting a nuclear missile into her chest. Alex arrives to save Clear by sacrificing himself. He does this by grabbing a power line which shoots him backwards into the garage, and Clear runs up and seems to call him baby, which feels kind of pet namey for somebody whom she showed no previous interest in. But the scene fades to white, so you know he's not dead, and we time jump to 6 months later when Carter, Alex, and Clear arrive in Paris because I guess they're over their fear of flying and, you know, the memories of all their dead friends, and trips to Paris are just super affordable for 90s teens. They intend to grab life by the nuts and drink beer in Paris while listening to Taika Waititi play acoustic guitar, a classic French instrument. While sipping on their drinks, they realize that technically nobody ever saved Alex. Like, he should have been killed by fate already because I guess fate doesn't stop chasing you unless you've been saved by somebody. And then he almost gets hit by a bus and plowed by a falling sign before Carter saves him. So, okay, now he's good. Except, oh wait! The other half of the sign looks like it's about to hit Carter, seemingly implying the cycle never stopped. The credits fly up before this resolves, but if that's the case, why did death wait 6 months to start up again? They literally just flew on a plane to France like they were going to do at the beginning of the movie. Why not blow up that plane? Or at the very least, give them food poisoning so they'd have to shit on the plane, which, thanks to Todd, we know is so embarrassing you might as well just friggin' die. That'd get the job done and be a pretty sick, stinky callback and punishment for their arrogant belief that they could thwart death. Or sure, just blow up half of France trying to squash them all in a foursome under a French prostitute or something. I don't care.
Yeah, kinda surprised you're cooking while death is trying to get you, to be honest.
I don't want to die of starvation.
Good point.
Anyway, Final Destination 2 begins exactly 1 year after Flight 180 exploded all to hell, or if you want to think about it another way, 6 months after Carter got splattered by that French sign. We quickly learn that actually all the survivors of Flight 180 are now dead, having been killed off screen, presumably because Devon Sawa demanded a salary more worthy of Casper.
Can I keep you?
It also begins with another long-ass opening credit sequence with a girl lying on a bed while a tarantula crawls around and a guy on TV debates with the host about whether death intentionally targets and tries to kill people. He's quick to point out that what he's talking about isn't supernatural like ghosts. It's a force that some people call the devil, but again, he's not religious, so he'll just call it death itself. Thank God he's not talking about something
Supernatural.
The TV host is confused, though, and asks how death having a design for when people should or shouldn't die is any different than just dying randomly whenever. And the guest angrily says, oh, it's very different. But is it? We're all gonna die eventually still, right? He even says we need to be on guard because nobody can escape death. And like, okay, I assume we should always try and not die from stupid accidents or whatever. I mean, how do you want me to live my life any different exactly? But anyway, the movie begins in earnest with two attractive women in early 2000s belly shirts about to embark on a road trip to Dayton, Florida, which some claim is actually worse than death, but it has never-ending margaritas, so you take the good with the bad. The first girl, Kimberly, is clearly a main character because she's reserved and has brown hair, while the other girl is definitely gonna die because she has blonde hair and talks about sex a lot.
Condoms, whips, chains.
They pick up two stoner moron dudes and hit the open road where they see this weird hobbit man looking directly into the camera. They laugh at a homeless woman for a bit, which is the exact opposite of saving the cat, and they're flashed by a random biker chick because the producers remembered they're making R-rated horror movies here, and every horror film without boobs is a wasted horror film. Frank Capra said that. Anyway, we meet a bunch of other motorists, including a truck driver who drinks while driving, which Kimberly says that's super irresponsible, although it does remind her to buckle her seatbelt, so really, who's the irresponsible one? I'm pretty sure it's legal to drink as long as you're wearing your seatbelt, Kimberly. Before we have any time to internalize who these people are, a truck starts dropping logs all over the road and killing people in horrific, fiery ways, including, thrillingly, this little moment where they clearly just shove some dummies in a car and flip that shit. Also, every car is clearly hauling grenades because how else would you explain this explosion? Of course, it turns out that this was all just a 10-minute premonition of grenade-rigged cars driven by crash test dummies, and Kimberly hasn't even run into the hilariously poor homeless woman yet. She realizes if she pulls out into the road, she'll die. So instead, she turns and blocks traffic behind her in an effort to keep them alive and her car insurance rate low. This causes the world's chillest cop to come up and ask what the issue is, scaring a friend in the back seat who apparently thinks he'll go to jail for having weed as if he's not super white. And while Kimberly and the cop quietly talk for seemingly hours without ever asking her to please move her big-ass car from the middle of the road, the log truck drives by and explodes 5 seconds later. In her premonition, it was probably 20 miles down the road, but here it's apparently only 20 feet. Something about Kimberly's deft driving kept the logs on that truck for way longer, I guess. Oh, and I guess Kimberly was still parked close enough to the main highway for her friends to get plowed by another massive truck. Guess she shouldn't have tried to stop all the traffic. A select few survivors who never drove around Kimberly's exploded vehicle and exploded friends are held at a police station just long enough for the coolest cat you've ever met to explain the entire plot of the first movie and how it may intersect with this movie.
Because when your number's up, right?
It's also revealed that Clear Rivers is actually alive somehow, but she's locked in an insane asylum, so... So okay, now Death is obviously hunting these people because there's nothing it hates more than an accounting error, starting with this dude named Evan, who has recently won the lottery and used that money to buy one of those sweet sunflower iMacs I was so excited about as a kid, and apparently almost nothing else. He still lives in a shithole and cooks for himself leftover Chinese food. Dude should be ordering the finest caviar and having it hand-fed to him by Dobby. But Evan's general lifestyle eventually leads to his general death as his frozen cheese sticks catch fire at the same time as his Chinese food in the microwave catches on fire, you know, because fate dropped a fridge magnet in the box, as fate often does, and at the same time he gets his arm stuck in a garbage disposal. But do any of these things kill him? No, of course not, because that's too obvious. He escapes his inferno of an apartment only to slip on spaghetti and get impaled by a fire escape ladder because Death has a bit of a silly side. Love what you do and you'll never work a day in your death. Now we flip to the cop reading an old newspaper that reveals 3 months ago, Alex Browning was killed by a falling brick. He spent 9 months cheating and defeating Death only to get smacked by a brick while walking down the street. Was there another brick waiting with a gun around the corner just in case the first brick didn't do the job? Come on, Alex. At least we know he'll be a friendly ghost. We see Kimberly's room again, and I realize she's also into weird ceramic shit like Alex was. So no wonder Death keeps wanting to kill these kids. They're freaking weird as hell. Anyway, Kimberly decides to visit Old Clear, so she puts the insane asylum into MapQuest, and it appears very far away, which is weird because there was a Mount Abraham High School bus at the scene of the accident, which is the high school they all went to in the first movie. So it seems like they're in the same city. I guess I just assume that every city has an insane asylum like Gotham. She meets up with Clear, but she makes sure that Kimberly doesn't bring in anything sharp, even though Clear's got newspapers all over his cell. I mean, look at this badass who isn't afraid of paper cuts. Clear reveals that she's actually institutionalized herself so that she can stay alive forever. The girls chat and they realize this time Death is working backwards through the list. This is treated like some sort of twist, like, oh shit, it's the sequel, so we need to raise the stakes, but I don't get it. I don't understand how that makes any difference, especially for the middle person. But whatever, Kimberly says that Clear is a coward for not going out there and helping people, even though there's literally nothing she can do. As far as they know, Death just attacks people cyclically forever. All you can do is have Death skip a particular person for a while, but then it's immediately on to the next and over and round until you die, which, again, is kind of just normal, right? I mean, Clear, for her part, tells Kimberly to look out for the signs. It's good advice because signs can be hard to spot, like, for example, when Kimberly hallucinates a pigeon attack. How would she have known that was a sign unless she was looking for signs? Death is so subtle with signs. Kimberly guesses those pigeons will kill 2 other survivors from an accident, a boy named Tim and his mom named Nora. So Kimberly and the cop who talked to her forever that one time when all her friends were hit by a truck rush to the dentist's office to stop them from fighting pigeons, I guess. But they're doing just fine at the dentist because Tim cracks a hilarious child rape joke to his mom.
If he gives me the gas and I wake up with my pants unbuttoned, we ain't paying.
Then the dentist just goes to town on Tim's nasty ass teeth, and lots of things seem to be going wrong, and it appears Tim is going to choke on a fish toy, but he doesn't because none of the obvious stuff kills people. Instead, he walks outside and charges a flock of pigeons like an idiot and accidentally gets crushed flatter than a crepe by a pane of glass. Rad. So here's a question. Why does Death go through all this trouble? Why offer several tantalizing fake-outs like electrical issues or getting too much laughing gas or choking on a toy fish when the vision is clearly about pigeons? Death never intended to kill Tim in those ways. It's almost just like it's showing off for somebody. Clear shows up even though she could be killed by a testy rain cloud at any moment, and together the 3 meet up with Candyman from the first movie. He rips off a nipple ring and explains that the only way to break Death's cycle is to create new life. You'd think that'd be read as the 3 of them need to get involved in an unprotected orgy right away to impregnate the women, but no, apparently they interpret it to mean that another survivor, Isabella, really needs to have her baby because she and her baby were supposed to die in the accident. So if that new baby is born, Death gives up, I guess. Which may explain Death's hard-on for killing people at gender reveal parties. Of course, some might argue that a 9-month-old fetus is already alive, but Death is apparently pro-choice, which...
that makes sense to me.
They head to protect Isabella from something, and they stop at a gas station where a young gentleman politely inquires if Clear might suck on his junk.
He's sucking my junk.
Biatch.
She declines because junk sucky can never lead to new life without some pretty gross maneuvering, and while Clear debates slobbing on some knobs like corn on the cob, Kimberly has another premonition about driving a white van into some water. They inspect the dash cam footage from the accident to see if they can spot her Vision van, and thankfully, Kimberly proves to be a major asset in this regard.
That's it.
They don't have Isabella's number or anything, so they put out an APB for her arrest, and I guess cops can just do that with no justification? Oh yeah, that's not just a movie thing. Well, that seems shitty. Anyway, the remaining survivors have a little meeting at the cop's apartment to talk through strategies to defeat death, as one does. Also, please meet Rory, a guy addicted to cocaine who acts pretty much just like your average run-of-the-mill pothead. Apparently in this universe, cocaine just mellows you out, bruh.
It's still there, bro. Yeah, I can get it for you.
Clear and Kimberly explain they all must be super vigilant and looking for death signs everywhere. And also, here are some burner phones, I guess, in case somebody sees a sign and needs to call the others to warn them about said sign or about a particularly terrible subway deal.
If I call and say, I don't know, Subway, get to a high-rise fast.
Most of them are on board except for the cool cat from earlier, named Eugene, who is still incredibly skeptical of the whole thing and thinks it's all bullshit, which is fine. But then why show up to the meeting, Eugene? Nobody forced you here. You could have just sent a text that said your ass had been alive all day instead of bringing your downer vibes to this sick-ass loft. That seems way too nice to rent with a cop salary.
My ass is alive, huh? Has been all day.
And even more surprisingly, there's an entire freaking kayak just suspended in the rafters for no apparent reason that almost kills Clear, even though if I was Death, that'd be the #1 way I'd try to kill people. They learn their lesson and get to work death-proofing the loft, only for the cocaine pothead to trip and fall over some weird shit and reveal a weird shadow that he claims looks like a man with hooks.
Man with hooks. Man with hooks. I think I see a man with hooks.
And since Nora just left to go home because she no longer cares about dying, they decide a man with hooks is gonna kill her. Eugene also just left, but he's kind of a jerk, so nobody thinks to call him. And what do you know? On the elevator with Nora is a man holding a basket full of prosthetic limbs, including hook hands. They call Nora on her prepaid phone, but she's apparently a moron because she asks, who's calling? Like they didn't just hand her this phone 7 minutes ago for this express purpose. Who else has that number? Nora freaks out and gets her hair caught in one of the hooks and foolishly tries to escape the elevator, which slams on her neck, pops her head clean off. And sure, it looks kind of like an accident, but a lot of people are about to be in huge trouble. I'm gonna guess that an elevator that cuts heads off goes against building codes. Somebody's probably going to get left on the literal and figurative hook for this. Anyway, Nora's severed head freaks Eugene out and he runs back, grabs the cop's gun and tries to kill himself, but it turns out that he fails because every bullet in the gun is a dud, which essentially means that Death refuses to let him die on his own terms, which is a little scary, but also sort of empowering, right? Like, whoever is next is screwed, but the rest of them could jump off a building or eat Arby's or something, which is pretty sick. All right, so at some point, Isabella is arrested and placed in a holding cell, so the survivors take a road trip to her because if she pops out that baby, they're all saved. While driving, they all realize they've survived near-death experiences as a direct result from the survivors of Flight 180 not dying. For example, the uptight woman, Kat, was supposed to go to a bed and breakfast where everybody dies from a gas leak, but she never made it because the bus she was on plowed into Terry from the first movie, delaying her stay. They realized that not dying on Flight 180 had a ripple effect that caused several other people to not die, so Death is frantically running around trying to tie up loose ends, even though these people also avoided a big death catastrophe of their own, so it's all sort of mood and maybe a bit redundant, but twist, I guess. Unfortunately, while the other survivors clumsily attempt to make the plot more interesting, Isabella's water breaks.
No, not here. No, you can't do this to me.
The guard drives her to the hospital in her
white van.
Somehow their van almost plows into the survivors' car, running them off the road into a field that they freaking utterly destroy thanks to Kat never letting out the gas for even a second as they slam into 100 different objects. Eugene gets impaled by some PVC pipe, and Kat gets stuck with a tree branch over her legs. Everybody else is basically fine though, so no harm, no foul. An ambulance comes to get Eugene and almost runs over a kid as it leaves, but fortunately, Rory knocks him out of the way. Unfortunately, a news crew shows up and parks so that they actually puncture their gas tank on a rock, causing gas to leak everywhere. And of course, that gas manages to somehow travel down some PVC pipes laying on the ground to the car where Kat is trapped. Speaking of Kat, firefighters use the jaws of life to get her out, but accidentally set off her airbag, which throws her head backwards into a piece of PVC pipe and her headrest, immediately killing her. This causes her to drop a cigarette that lands in the gas trail that creates a chain of fire that blows up the news van and sends a section of barbed wire fence flying right through the air, cutting Rory into like 4 huge chunks. It's pretty shocking, but honestly nobody's all that upset because Rory and Kat, like most characters in these movies, both kind of suck anyway. The rest of them grab the farmer's truck and race to the hospital to protect Isabella, but Kimberly has yet another vision where she's being choked to death by a nurse. She assumes this means that a random nurse is going to choke Isabella to death, which seems unlikely, but whatever. And speaking of Isabella, the birth is going pretty poorly and the nurse is not helping.
This baby's in trouble.
Elsewhere in the hospital, Eugene's entire room conspires to kill him, culminating in his respirator getting unplugged. The cop delays the strangling doctor long enough for Isabella to have her baby, but then Kimberly remembers actually Isabella wasn't going to die in the original accident, so that baby's entirely pointless. Just like any baby. Then Isabella runs to Eugene's room and they both explode and their bodies are thrown all the way down the hallway right in front of Kimberly, which seems implausible, but it does convince Kimberly that she needs to die to end these cycles. So she steals a freaking ambulance and drives it into the lake, which is a super waste of an ambulance. Like, she could have just jumped in the lake, but no, she needed to destroy life-saving equipment, freaking dick. And none of it matters anyway, because of course she's saved by the cop and brought back to life, therefore creating new life, I guess. She effectively cheated death, somehow, so Death decides to leave them all alone because it's just so darn confused. Of course, they've literally all died by this point except Kimberly and the cop, and so they decide to go have a barbecue with the farmer and his family from earlier. Yum! You'd think they'd have an aversion to revisiting the place where 2 of their friends were gored to death, and that led to the injuries resulting in 2 other deaths, and that maybe the farmer would be hesitant to bring back these people with the worst luck of all time and who did thousands of dollars in damage to their farm, but hey! Time heals all wounds. Oh, except for the farmer's dumbass son, who gets blasted by the grill as punishment for Rory saving him from that ambulance. Does that mean the cycle is restarted for Kimberly and the cop because they were associated with the bad at grilling kid? Who knows? But more importantly, who the hell cares? Pass the burgers. You put spaghetti in the oven, right?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Ugh. Okay, I'll do the stove.
Man, bring me a PSP or something. At least I have something to do then.
Alright, so the third movie has another long-ass opening credit sequence, but this one is carnival themed. Ooh, even the 3 is in wacky carnival font. Also, I wonder which animation house died to make that CGI pinball sequence. After we've learned who the freaking casting director is, we see a few hot teens riding a drop ride at what Wikipedia describes as an amusement park in Pennsylvania. Wendy, portrayed by a profoundly slumming at Mary Elizabeth Winstead, is taking pictures for the school yearbook. Her best friend's boyfriend, Kevin, helps by ensuring that the yearbook will have many tasteful photos of G-strings and camel toe for posterity. I mean, look how introspective exposed underwear makes this guy. And before you get all up on your high horse, Wendy kind of agrees. Like, she does seem to think it's important to photograph these girls that the movie keeps telling me are attractive. Anyway, Wendy's friend, holy shit, is the wife and sauce son? She reveals that she's gonna break up with that boyfriend after graduation because he's a dick, but not so much of a dick butt that she's unwilling to continue to date him for a little while because she already bought the prom dress, and that shit ain't cheap. Maybe she also likes camel toe photos. There's also a 4th person there who's Wendy's boyfriend, and he is surprisingly attentive to Wendy and her needs for a high school dude in a horror film whose best friend takes upskirt photos. They run into Wendy's sister who, hey, it's Monica from Silicon Valley, but oh no, she's not supposed to be at the carnival because she's not a senior? Is this carnival on school property? My school never did anything cool. But my school also never unleashed the grim specter of death on me, so again, you take the good with the bad. Although if there were funnel cakes involved. Unfortunately, Wendy's boyfriend uses his sensitivity to convince Wendy to ride a roller coaster called Devil's Flight that features a huge devil clearly voiced by Candyman from the last few movies. In line, we meet some goth nerds who provide stats about how it's unlikely you die on a roller coaster.
Yep, odds are like 1 in 250 million of dying on a roller coaster.
And the attractive women from earlier, and another pervert. This one's named Frankie Cheeks, and he has a video camera for probably pervert reasons. Though Wendy agrees to ride, she doesn't want to ride in the front, but her best friend refuses to sit in the back with her because she's going to Berkeley next year and won't get to do this kind of thing for a while, which is a weird flex, but okay, it's Berkeley. The two dudes flip a coin to see who gets stuck with old wussy Wendy, and the pervy boyfriend loses. While in the back, they experience what is, frankly, a very poor roller coaster experience. Of course, this is all a premonition of Wendy's, and she is not happy about it. Pretty much immediately, we realize, oh, okay, this is a real actress, because I actually started to feel for her. How sad to have all your friends explode on a roller coaster. She flips out, and it results in a scuffle that leads to her, Kevin, the goths, the hotties, Frankie Cheeks, and a football player dude all getting thrown off the ride. Despite Wendy's and her boyfriend's pleas, he and Wendy's best friend are forced to remain on the ride and explode to their fiery deaths because everybody else was chanting, "Hey ho, let's go," like they just watched Jimmy Neutron. And also,
nobody else gets off this ride!
We then cut to Wendy at school just throwing her books in a trash can, which is very wasteful. Anyway, she's sad, and it's raining, and other people notice that she's sad, and Kevin tells her about Flight 180 just so we can get a brief connection to the first two movies, and then her sister's really shitty to her about this charm bracelet thing, but again, her sad acting is so good, you almost forget you're watching a friggin' Final Destination.
You're all I have left. You think when I find a place, maybe you could come stay with me for a while?
I feel sorry for you, Wendy. You've had a rough go of it. Anyway, her sister wants to borrow the camera that Wendy used to photograph their classmates right before they all died, and Wendy says, okay, but I need to charge it first. Then she downloads a bunch of the photos while we intercut with the two attractive girls getting burned to death at a tanning salon with the sort of gratuitous nudity you expect, nay, demand from a horror film of this caliber. Our little series is finally growing up. The girls die because of some spilled liquid interacting with electronics, and look, I know I've never written a movie for a franchise that routinely grosses over $100 million, but surely there's some other sort of mishap in this world that doesn't involve sneaky liquid running through electrical outlets. Whatever. Now we're at their joint funeral, and a pastor says that death is fair, but the boy goth named Ian says, nah, Osama bin Laden is still alive. You know, just in case we forgot that this movie is pre-Obama.
These two girls who never done to anybody.
It's bullshit. I did not hit her.
And elsewhere, Frankie regrets seeing women as fun bags, which is not a phrase. And the jock delivers maybe the most powerful speech I've ever heard about funerals.
Yo, man, these things really suck, man. Boring.
Elsewhere, Wendy and Kevin admit that they never feel their former lovers' souls. And also, Wendy realizes that the last photograph taken of somebody includes a clue into how they were gonna die. For example, Abraham Lincoln's last known photo has a line where his head is, and also there's this photo of the Twin Towers with an airplane shadow, which I don't think counts as a person dying per se, but this movie is apparently very ready to talk about 9/11, whether we are or not, so just buckle up. They look at a photo of Frankie, who will presumably die next, and try to determine just how he'll kick the bucket. Kevin sort of jokingly mentions that those prizes on the wall look like SpongeBob, and that maybe Frankie will get smashed by a giant SpongeBob, which is a personal fantasy of mine, or maybe it has to do with drowning because, you know, SpongeBob lives underwater, to which Wendy says,
It's so sad that you know that.
and to which I say, hey, f you, lady. Everybody knows SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea, and if you watch more SpongeBob, you probably wouldn't cry all the time. Wendy? Oh, f you, lady. But anyway, what does happen is that a truck backs up to them in a drive-thru in such a way that they can't open the door, and then another truck hits their car from behind so hard that it causes the vehicle's engine to shoot out the front and shred the head of the person in front of them, who just so happens to be Frankie Cheeks. Mystery solved. Ooh, like Sandy Cheeks. Also, I'm pretty sure that that truck is from the second movie. Maybe the whole series is a metaphor about drinking and driving. I mean, the jury's still out on whether that's bad or not, right? Anyway, Wendy's pretty upset, but Kevin calms her down by resting his hand gently upon her leg, which is still actively covered in Frankie's brains. They decide to track down the jock guy named Lewis, as he's next on the list, but before they go, Kevin asks Wendy if his death will involve ass play, because if so, I mean, go ahead and take me, am I right?
I mean, there's nothing like up my ass.
If I die with a thing in my ass, that means I lived, you know? They find Lewis lifting weights with a team called the Sultans, which is a name that probably wouldn't fly today. And he thinks it's all bullshit because he's a poorly written black character in a horror franchise, just like the other poorly written black character in this horror franchise. Of course, it's not bullshit, and his head is flattened by a Bowflex, splattering blood all over Wendy and Kevin. Thankfully, the gym has pretty decent showers and a change of clothes for them because they walk away looking fresh, but not noticeably amidst or near, like, police or medical professionals. Apparently nobody was very worried about old flathead Lewis, I guess. So now they go to see the goth couple as they're technically next, even though they have yet to prevent even a single death. And Ian talks about Osama again. Man, he really hates that guy.
It's a big no, Pip. Osama bin supervisor wants me to get rid of these pigeons first.
Then Ian nail guns a bunch of birds to death like they're Al-Qaeda or something. Wendy and Kevin attempt to convince Ian and his girlfriend Erin that they're gonna die, while Ian just drives a forklift around in after-hours Lowe's and smashes into like 30 different dangerous products.
That's crazy.
Ian doesn't really believe them, although Ian does try to make some weird claim that death is like momentum, right? And according to Isaac Newton, momentum in one direction implies momentum in the opposite. So if Wendy killed herself, it'd all be fine, which, I don't know, maybe. But before they can finish puzzling that one out, Ian's drunken baby-ass forklift driving sets off a chain reaction that culminates in Erin getting nail-gunned in the head like 15 times like she was an Al-Qaeda pigeon. Oh, and now Ian believes. That's all it takes. Wendy and Kevin regroup and realize that Wendy's sister Julie is actually technically next in line to die, possibly along with some unnamed friend because she was supposed to be on the coaster too. But she never mentioned that she got off for some truly inexplicable reason that never gets explained and will maybe one day lead to my death as I keep thinking about it. Julie is headed to a fun little 4th of July fireworks session. So that's where Wendy and Kevin go, even though Wendy determines that Kevin is likely to die of too much fireworks and Wendy is likely to die of too much Ian. Which doesn't exactly seem like fate, but maybe I'm just not a true believer. Anyway, they go to the fireworks thing, and Paul Revere is there, so is Benjamin Franklin.
You, Ben Franklin.
And a couple of dweebs scare a horse with firecrackers, and it runs through the crowd and somehow wraps its collar, reins. I don't do horses. It wraps it around Julie's neck, dragging her around. Thankfully, Kevin slices the rope with a friggin' cutlass before Julie dies. But unfortunately, the horse keeps running and somehow manages to hurl a flag through Julie's friend, which is pretty badass for a horse. Napoleon could have won Waterloo with just a couple good flag-throwing horses like this one. Oh, and also Kevin gets kicked by Napoleon's steed and then semi-exploded by a gas tank, but that's all good, he lives. Anyway, then Ian shows up to presumably kill Wendy for, I don't know, warning him and his girlfriend that they were gonna die, but he doesn't really do anything because he's pretty much immediately flattened by a falling sign of some gooey gothy paste. We jump to 5 months later and Wendy rides a train with her cool new college friends when suddenly her sister gets on the train. And they notice that Kevin is on the train. And immediately the train gets derailed and hit by 30 other trains and they all die, including this dummy. But twist! That was just yet another Wendy premonition and they've got about 11 seconds to figure out how to stop the train before they're killed, you know, for real, for real. We will never know because we cut to credits. Hey, do you think I should put my butthole in the sink?
Why would you do that?
I'm gonna try it. Oh. Fine, I won't put my butthole in the sink, Mom. Oh, yeah. Finally, a final destination is not for friggin' wussies. There's no opening credit sequence here, baby. Just butt ripping, butt metal on NASCAR. I'm slipping back into my Georgia molasses. It's not what I'm going for, but it's just there at the tip of my tongue, feeling so juicy. Everybody got that molasses shit off in their mouth. I say. Got like the big chicken in the Looney Tunes. We go from the good old boys driving race cars to the stands where we meet an entire host of wacky characters. We've got this group of 4 college-ish aged people that never mention college other than a brief allusion to studying. And there's Nick, who sounds like an off-brand Dave Franco. Hunt, who acts like his first name should be spelled with a C and who snuck booze through security and binoculars somehow. And then there's also Lori, who's currently dating Nick, but will one day grow up to be the mom of Homelander's kid. And Janet, who can't believe they chose to go to NASCAR instead of a movie, which... is that really a decision people regularly make? Movies aren't necessarily cheap, but the average NASCAR ticket is like $150. You just go to a NASCAR race on a whim? Don't answer that. I don't give a shit. Elsewhere, we see the world's worst mother shoving tampons into her son's ears and then mocking them. A racist guy and his girlfriend with wandering feet.
Need you to move your foot.
A black security guard for the racist guy to have conflict with. A kind of cowboy fella. And a mechanic guy who also has a girlfriend. They're all having a great time except, oh no! They're seated in section 180, just like Flight 180. Even worse, the stadium is clearly going to shit, as evidenced by cracks in the pillars, broken seats, and wiggly screws. Even more worse, somebody spilled some oil on the track, and worst of all, is that Napoleon Dynamite on the pit crew? Somebody is definitely gonna die. And what do you know, Napoleon or some other idiot leaves a tool stuck inside a car which falls onto the track and pops one of the car's tires, causing it to flip and initiate a multi-car pileup resulting in the deaths of over 50 people. People are just decapitated by tires, engulfed in flames, crushed by falling concrete, trampled to death. It is very exciting. At least a few of these deaths could have been avoided if literally any of the drivers considered, I don't know, hitting the brakes. But if you ain't first, you're last, god. So they just keep slamming into each other until the entire stadium collapses. Apparently somebody on the production team finally learned about those newfangled computer-generated graphics everybody's been talking about. Maybe they saw Pixar's Cars the night before shooting and thought, this is sick, we should totally do that in our movie. I mean, seriously, everything is CG, and they go hard with it. The explosions are insane, the destruction is overwhelming, and the quality is low. We're talking Sharknado levels of competence here. Based on the amount of CG, you'd think the budget was massive, but based on the quality, I'm gonna guess that the director just slipped his tech-savvy nephew $13 and told him to just go nuts. Anyway, this computer-generated orgy of death was obviously just a premonition from Nick, and it scares him so badly he squeezes Lori's thigh hard enough to legitimately hurt her, which implies that Nick has insane forearm strength. I mean, have you ever tried to hurt somebody by one hand squeezing their thigh? Not an easy task, let me tell you. So Nick uses those spinach Popeye forearms to initiate the standard Final Destination fight that gets everybody I just mentioned thrown out of the stadium just in time to avoid the mass death event. Well, I mean, except for the mechanic's girlfriend who still gets decapitated by a flying car somehow. And okay, here are the opening credits, but again, none of that artsy close-up shit with ceramic monkeys and fans. Here, we've got a bunch of terrible CG death highlights from the series past set to the buttest of butt metal. Afterwards, we're presented with the most provocative question of the series so far. But the protagonists don't even bother discussing whether that's supposed to be some sort of Jurassic Park pun, and instead talk about the premonition and whether they were supposed to die. And also, Hunt kisses a lucky coin and tries to force Janet to kiss it because, I don't know, they had to write something.
Go ahead, Janet. Kiss it.
Nick and Lori attend the memorial for all those dead people, and the racist guy yells at the security guard because, again, he's racist. That's already uncomfortable, but then he says the N-word and calls him chocolate. And in case you're wondering, the guy who wrote this movie looks like this. Anyway, later that night, Nick has a really shitty-looking CGI dream about hooks and fire, and we cut from that to the racist guy going full KKK on the security guard's front lawn. He's got a freaking cross and everything. Unfortunately for him, he drove his work tow truck to the little cross burning, and it starts driving away because fate. Inexplicably, he manages to get grabbed by his own tow truck's hook and then set on fire, and then his car explodes his head right onto the security guard's porch. Yeah! I don't think I've ever seen a more powerful condemnation of racism put to film. The next morning, Nick realizes he must have had another premonition, about the racist tow truck driver. Apparently, the series is tired of having characters deciphering death's intentions through photographs or signs, and it'd rather just flex its terrible CG budget to hand-deliver clues right to Nick's brain. Certainly a lot easier to film and write than, anything compelling. Next on the list is the mother as negligent as she is attractive. She hands her kids some money to go play video games for an hour while she gets a haircut. I don't know why I thought that Xboxes had already been invented in 2009, but maybe it's just that Halo could never hold a candle to Time Crisis 3. Anyway, she sits down and Death sets up 20 different ways she could die, including the most horrific scene in the series to date. Also included, cans of hairspray that legitimately just come to life and skitter across the table towards a hot hair instrument. I'm not a hairdresser. Eventually, her kids come back and make a mess of things, and you'd assume somebody would die, but no, they were all red herrings, and the mom just gets killed by a rock kicked up by a lawnmower outside. Creative. Nick is now convinced, okay, maybe people are going to die in order of the whatever. This is the 4th time I've seen the scene. I don't give a shit. Andy finds Flight 180 on the internet. I just want to reiterate that Kimberly is a real asshole for not posting anywhere how to beat death. I mean, it's crazy that they figured it out in the second movie, and even though every subsequent film protagonist learns about Flight 180, there's never any literature about the survivors from the second movie who legitimately learn how to defeat death. Like, do a Reddit AMA or something. The survivors constantly debate whether intervening defeats death or just changes the order of their deaths, which is a debate that the first movie settled, but man, it sure is fun to discuss it again. Nick experiences yet another vision, and he and Lori head to the racetrack to try and remember the order of everybody's deaths, but Nick is too much of a dumbass to remember anything. Thankfully, the security guard is working that night and is shockingly on board with their little claims and helpfully shows them the cameras from that day. It has to be illegal to show random break-ins, extremely graphic snuff footage that should absolutely have been impounded by the police for the forthcoming trial against the owners of the Speedway for clearly never maintaining their property and the resulting 52 deaths, but hey, this moves the plot forward, so. The three of them determine that the mechanic is probs next, so they go warn him of his impending death, but he gets grated through the fence links, which doesn't seem physically possible, but again, we've got this goddamn CG budget, so let's use it. The movie clearly anticipates the audience losing interest around this point because it cuts to an extremely gratuitous sex scene with Hunt and some random girl at a public pool, mere feet away from actual children. Hunt is one curious tween away from becoming a registered sex offender, but to be fair, aren't we all? Meanwhile, Lori gives some money to a homeless guy who thinks pennies are bullshit.
Penny? That's some bullshit.
Nick, Lori, and the security guard, who we learn is a former alcoholic who killed his family drunk driving because this movie has weighty themes, determines that either Hunt or Lori will die next, and they'll die by water. As it turns out, Hunt drops his lucky coin and dives into the pool to retrieve it. Unfortunately, he somehow gets his asshole stuck over the drain and literally has his ass sucked to death.
There are worse ways to go.
I mean, there's nothing like up my ass.
For her part, Janet somehow gets trapped in a malfunctioning car wash that starts pouring water into her car. At no point does she attempt to open her doors, but thankfully, she's saved by the security guard and Lori before she can die in the most humiliating possible way this side of a lethal ass sucking. So now the security guard is presumably next on the list, but it's cool. He doesn't mind dying because, again, he killed his whole family. He just goes home to die, I guess, while Lori and Nick death-proof their home in anticipation. But then they spill some wet on a newspaper that appears to highlight the phrase, "Through action, they were saved." They run over to the security guard's house to let him know, actually, the cycle has stopped. Probably. Maybe. And that's a relief to Mr. Guard because he's been trying to kill himself all day, and nothing's worked.
I've been trying to kill myself all day.
Anyway, they vow to no longer take their lives for granted, so Lori and Janet determine to use their newfound lease on life to go see a 3D movie.
Really cool.
Oh, this movie's in 3D. That makes sense. CG looks totally awesome in 3D. Nick gets yet another frickin' vision, this one complete with a sick-ass CGI snake, and realizes, oh shit, the cycle isn't over because he forgot about the kindly old cowboy who had apparently also survived the NASCAR event, something that not even Dale Earnhardt can claim. Anyway, he's in a hospital bed below the room of another older racist.
You know how many of your kind I killed in Korea?
I'm Chinese, sir.
That racist has weak legs and lungs, so he can't turn the water off his bath before it soaks the floor so much that the whole bath falls through the floor and flattens the kindly old cowboy, making him much more like Dale Earnhardt. You know, I've been annoyed how the previous movies keep using water or some sort of liquid in every death, but this one really leans into it, like death is clearly a waterbender. Even Even though Nick and the security guard were present for the flattening, they don't seem super worried about it. Nick's nonchalance in particular continues even after an ambulance going 90 miles an hour in front of a hospital pops the security guard into a gooey mist. Another Nick vision shows Laurie dying in a theater when some construction randomly catches on fire, so he runs to the mall to prevent it. Laurie, oblivious and not answering her phone, purchases a hideous pair of shoes before the movie because Nick
likes me in sneaks,
which is objectively the tamest possible kink. Anyway, Laurie and Janet eventually end up in the theater, but Laurie's wigging out because, you know, everybody keeps dying, but Janet tells her to shut the hell up, watch the movie. Laurie. In lieu of pulling a fire alarm, Nick runs theater to theater to find Laurie. He manages to rescue her from the original series of looking CG explosions, but Laurie is still eaten alive by an elevator. So it goes. And then surprise, even that was a vision. Meaning we're now seeing visions within visions like Inception, but shitty. And so Nick runs to the mall to save Laurie again. This time he goes straight to the source to stop the fire itself. He succeeds, even though, you know, he gets nail gunned to a wall, which would actually be a pretty cool kink if he wasn't so obsessed with girls and sneaks. So now it's a few days later, and Nick thinks he's some kind of safety expert.
Is this thing supposed to be this way? Isn't it supposed to be screwed tighter?
You're right.
Nick, Laurie, and Janet discuss how great it is that they've probably definitely escaped death for real this time. Then Nick asks, hey, what if we didn't? And Death's plan was always to get us to this coffee shop, and then all three of them are hit by a truck. And since nobody can answer Nick's question due to their brutal CG deaths, allow me to take a stab. If that was Death's plan, then Death is a freaking moron. Like, why go through all that effort? The earlier movies implied that Death is a dispassionate force merely tying up loose ends when somebody somehow magically has a premonition of its plans, but now we're supposed to believe that Death might send visions as a way to screw with people and instigate extremely elaborate long cons? You're telling me that it was Death's plan to blow up a NASCAR event, kill a bunch of survivors with things like ass sucking, allow a theater explosion to be prevented, which, by the way, should start an entirely new cycle with the hundreds of people who were supposed to be killed in the mall. Also, Death could kill them with a normie-ass truck? Yo, Death is stupid. Is Death a boy? It seems like he'd be a boy, because only somebody with a small dick would be this insecure about not getting his way all the time. But at least his most complicated plan only took 75 minutes of runtime, of which only about 80% was CG. Think this needs hot sauce? I feel like it needs hot sauce. Ugh. Oh my, Death won't let me do anything!
You know, if you want to get rid of that baby fat, you should try the Chan. They're called tits.
It took 5 movies, but finally we get an opening title sequence that is legitimately kind of cool. Lots of exploding glass. Always a crowd pleaser. Less pleasing? It goes on for a whopping 3 minutes and 47 seconds. I guess they were embarrassed about how the last movie didn't even sniff 90 minutes. Also, the producers are weirdly proud of all their previous death sequences. Like, we have to watch them flash back through them all like it would take some sort of genius to come up with rock from lawnmower, go through eyeball, or killed by brick, off screen. Anyway, after we've learned the names of everybody who just walked by the film set on their way to Starbucks, we open on young Sam's breakfast spread. He's cooked a bunch of yummy treats for his coworkers to nom on before their company retreat. Unfortunately, this attention to croissant detail comes at the expense of, you know, his job.
As your boss, I'm ready to fire your ass.
Because his friend and boss, Peter, tells Sam that, yeah, he really sucks at selling paper. By contrast, Peter is really good at getting sucked by the intern, Candace.
But that 12:30 curfew tonight, you should plan on breaking that.
Why?
For the naked.
So that's inspiring. Speaking of the sucky intern, she's apparently a mean idiot because when the office hottie, Olivia, shows up, clad very scantily, Candace attempts to fat shame her because she mistakes Olivia's ample breasts for baby fat.
They're called
tits.
It is truly one of the most confusing dialogue sequences of all time. Oh, and then freaking Todd Packer shows up, and he's predictably a mean boss. Then we set up a little conflict between Nathan, the college-educated kid in charge of the warehouse, and Roy, the old-ass friggin' Neanderthal union rep.
We what? Retarded?
And then the interpersonal conflict jumps into the stratosphere with Sam's girlfriend and coworker Molly breaking up with him right before they get on the bus. Apparently because Sam works part-time at a fancy restaurant at night and they want to send him to Paris. And she doesn't want to go with him because I guess she's got such a sweet gig at this paper company. Has The Office really romanticized paper sales so much that it's now more appealing than Paris?
Then rushing through the Paris night, they hounded you, you lost control.
Anyway, they hop on the bus and oh shit, there's an informative video by a company called 180 Consulting. 180 is the death number. It's also a very common number, I would think, because of the whole 180 degrees thing, but still. Fate has a consulting company. Wow. Oh, right. And also I should mention that there's also another guy, this Lothario nerd, leisure suit Larry type character named Isaac, who provides a semi-comedic through line.
We're told like I'm a really, really good listener by a lot of ladies. Shh, wait, don't say anything.
So anyway, they're driving over a bridge that's undergoing maintenance and they're forced to stop for some unclear reason. It's a functioning 2-lane bridge. Like all the lanes are open. Who or what are they stopping for? Well, the answer presumably is they're stopping for
death itself.
We realize things are both bad and about to get CG'd into oblivion when a computer-generated water cooler falls off the bridge into the river. I can't imagine that's cheaper than hucking a real water cooler off a bridge, but maybe it's harder to put in 3D.
I don't know.
Before long, the bridge begins collapsing and Sam grabs Molly's hand and makes a run for it. Candace quickly falls off the bridge and is impaled on a sailboat, which is as awesome as is impractical, and Peter offers up the most half-ass scream I have ever heard. Isaac dies in the bus, Olivia's crushed by a falling car, Nathan is obliterated by a cable, Todd Packer is burned with oil, Peter's impaled with rebar, and Sam gets cut in half so hard he becomes a low-budget video game character. So Sam transitions back to live action and realizes, guys, it was a premonition. He realizes this in part because he cuts his finger again like he did in the premonition. And quick question, do people that cut themselves really suck their own blood? They do it like 4 times in this movie, and that's gross, right? Why would you stick your dirty, bloody fingers in your mouth? Anyway, Sam grabs Molly and starts running, and others get off the bus with enough lead time to avoid the impending disaster. Not all of them, mind you. 17 coworkers still die, but all the ones who had lines, they live. Smash cut to the police station where a cop grills Sam about how he knew the bridge was going to collapse. I mean, he goes so far as to ask the others if Sam has ever held extreme views. After all, it's a little suspicious that Sam broke up with his girlfriend mere seconds before getting on the bus to head directly to the bridge. And you know, maybe he was so sad about the breakup, he found a way to destroy an entire bridge just, you know, on a sad, angry whim. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the 9/11 hijackers were all broken up with, you know, mid-flight.
Osama, let's go. Still kicking.
Oh, never mind. They determined the bridge was flattened by strong winds. But then again, do we really know how hard Sam can blow? I mean, maybe his lungs are industrial strength fans. You need to pursue every lead. Anyway, they go to the mass funeral and they run into the old Candyman again. And he tells them to watch out because death doesn't like to be cheated, don't you know? And they don't act on this info. Now Sam is cooking and he's having a rough night of it. So he goes to see Molly, who's making tea.
Death tea, maybe?
No, it's just Earl Grey or some shit. She reiterates that he needs to follow what he loves while she pursues what she loves. Becoming a mid-level regional manager at Dunder Mifflin, I guess. She literally never offers an alternate reason why she wouldn't want to go to Paris.
Paris night.
That scene resolved, we're now in a gym where Peter drops the intern off at gymnastics practice. And thankfully it's like an adult gymnastics practice. And apparently she's a halfway decent college athlete, along with being a halfway decent intern, in that sleeping with the boss is the best thing you could do as an intern.
Dave?
So obviously she's about to die here, but once again, death offers several tantalizing possibilities. I mean, water spits on some electrical wires, per usual, and a ceiling fan acts up and drops a single screw on the balance rod or the pommel beam. Look, I played GameCube growing up. Anyway, you think she's gonna go all quiet place on the screw, but she doesn't. She transitions to the swingy bars and starts swinging. But then another girl gets on the beamy beam and lands on the screw, falls off, and knocks some powder into Candace's face. Fortunately, she's a pro and gracefully sticks to the landing. 10 out of 10! I'm gonna call it now. That is the most brutal death in the series. Also, the most creative. Also, not possible. But good work, team. Give yourselves a hand. So that's sad, but now the remaining survivors clear out their old co-workers' desks, and Isaac is straight stealing dead people's shit, including a gift card to a spa. It's at said spa where we realize Isaac is not only a disgusting pig, he's also mildly racist.
Yum, yum, dim sum. Yo, Buddha, slow down on the rice cakes.
Which is, weirdly, a growing theme here near the end. To punish him for his racism, the spa gives him an older, less attractive masseuse who pulverizes his body and stuffs him full of acupuncture needles. Worst of all, she leaves the room. While some incense catches the room on fire, Isaac's bed breaks, and eventually his head is caved in by Buddha. And I'm just now realizing how many places are going to be closed because of Death's indiscretions. I already mentioned the Speedway and the apartment complex, but this spa is going to be closed forever. Imagine the liability insurance needed to cover a fire that killed a client. And what about that tanning salon that cooked 2 clients alive? The hospital where a tub fell through the floor and an ambulance ran somebody over? The public pool that sucked out that dude's asshole? The amusement park with the off-the-rails roller coaster and that off-brand Lowe's that shot nails into a woman's face? I mean, and that's just off the top of the dome. That's a lot of economic damage.
Death?
And this spot's presumably a minority-owned business. Yo, that sucks! Anyway, Candyman is still a coroner or a mortician or whatever, so he shows up along with the rest of the co-workers to collect Isaac's pervy, shitty dead body. They ask him what they should do, and the Candyman introduces a brand new, crazy wrinkle into the game by suggesting if they murder somebody, that person would take their place on Death's list. This is something that would have been awesome to learn about at any point before this one, and also feels like a completely arbitrary rule for Death to have. Does he just have like a quota he needs to meet? Like 150,000 deaths a day, or he's gonna get chewed out by that Mac Daddy Graham Reaper? I mean, that sounds really stressful. I'm sorry, Death. So now they're all considering flat-out murder, but Olivia first needs LASIK surgery before she can even consider trying to stab anybody. Predictably, it goes poorly, and she gets lasered all over the eye and face. But less predictably, what actually kills her is falling out the window. Oh, that's another business closed forever. Weirdly, nobody ever receives or notices any signs about Death's intentions. A major shift from 4, where Death would apparently run his DRGT ideas past Nick before he'd try anything. Hell, they don't even mention the death order thing until an hour and 4 minutes into this 90-minute movie. That's some powerful restraint. Also, there have been surprisingly few deaths to this point, and we're nearing the end of the movie. Death's gonna really need to pick it up if it's gonna fulfill its contractual obligations to New Line Cinema and Mac Daddy. To that end, Roy and Nathan engage in a verbal sparring match, and Nathan kind of sort of murders Roy by taking advantage of a falling hook, effectively removing his name from the list. Then Todd Packer investigates Roy's dead body and is immediately hammered in the face by a wrench. Okay, yeah, that's more what I'm talking about. Then Sam decides, you know what? I am gonna move to Paris. Maybe Death doesn't want me dead anyway because my foie gras is to die for. Before he leaves, he cooks a little late night meal for Molly. And of course, this little date is crashed by Peter, who's just really wigging out about the whole needing to kill people thing. I mean, he admits that he hasn't killed anybody yet, but he would like to murder Molly because technically she didn't die in the vision, so she doesn't deserve to live, I think is his crazy ass logic. Regardless, he's correct that killing Sam would do nothing for him because Sam was supposed to die anyway, although Peter does have a gun, meaning that he could kill pretty much anybody with relative ease, so it seems like he could take out somebody much more deserving of death, or at least somebody less conspicuous than Molly. But no, this series has never tried its hand at having an actual full-on villain fight, so let's go ahead and turn Peter into a real bad boy. Also, you're a big dumb idiot if you think that this fight doesn't end when the bad boy knocks the good boy to the ground, but before he can finish him, the good girl jumps on the bad boy from behind last minute and gets knocked off, but not before the good boy can get back up and win the fight, because that's quite possibly how every single menage a trois final fight goes in every movie ever made. There is no other way to do it. It's as easy to predict as the rising of the sun and the deaths of any marginally sexual characters in a horror movie. The only additional twist to this classic formula is the cop shows up again and gets murdered by Peter, which technically means that Peter is now off of Death's list. But then Sam kills Peter, and by the transitive property, he's now free to move about the country without having to worry about getting murdered by a haunted toaster or some shit. He immediately takes advantage of this freedom by boarding a plane to Paris with Molly, who I guess gave up on her paper dreams. And hey, weren't there other characters who tried to board a plane to Paris? Oh shit! That's right, kids! This movie is secretly set in the year 2000, and they're on board the same Flight 180 that exploded all to hell way back in the first movie, because twist! They're now dead too! Is Death getting back at them, or is this just crappy luck?
I don't know.
Cut to Nathan hanging out at Roy's memorial service. You know, the guy he murdered with a hook. And somebody tells him that, hey, Roy would have been dead from a heart thing at any moment anyway, so basically, good thing he died this way. So, you know, Nathan is absolved of all guilt. Well, until Flight 180 crashes through the top of the bar, flattening him. Now, let me treat you to a supercut of literally every death in the series. Again, for like the 90th time. What a fitting end. So I defeated death, right?
Nobody can defeat death. But yeah, I think you're probably good.
Awesome. I'm so freaking hungry. Well, if I'm gonna die anyway, I'm just gonna go to freaking Arby's.
They do have the meats.
They sure do, Candyman. They sure do. Lots of exploding glass. Always a cloud.
No.
Lots of exploding glass. Always a cloud preaser. What is wrong with me? So Alex wipes his shitty ass. I'm an artist. I had to get real semen from a cow. Human semen's not milky enough. You get it. Dave!